Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome all. Today we've got a really good session. So we've got Mastering Full Stack with Azure, Effortless Infrastructure and Well-Architected Framework with the great Simone. So welcome, Simone, and thank you for presenting to us today.
Thank you.
Sort of some housekeeping first. We've got this session is delivered on behalf of our Microsoft Learning Room called the Azure Cloud Commanders. So within the Microsoft Tech community, if you go to Microsoft Learn, you can go down and select groups. It's a bit hidden, but there's a list of amazing groups by community members around different subjects. So the one that I run, for example, is Azure Cloud Commanders. So it's all about just Azure architecture, Azure administration, applications, essentially everything. Then you have more specified groups. So we've got analytics within Dira, Cantonese, even definitely ones in other languages as well. So all things Azure Dev and AI. So that would be a pretty busy learning room at the moment. So definitely check those out. They are a bit hidden, but some of them, like my one, is open for anyone to come and join and look at the sessions. Others you just need to register for, but it's all awesome. Just this session will be recorded for those who can't make it. So just be aware that if you do post anything in the chat, which I'll be monitoring throughout, if you post anything related to like your organization and things like that, it may appear in the chat on the screen in the recording. So just be aware of that. This is an inclusive session. So we're all here to learn, all here to have fun. And yeah, just be human. No silly questions. Everyone comes to learn at different times, different knowledge base, different diverse backgrounds. So I'll hand over to Simone. I'll just swap the screens around, but thank you for coming and presenting today. Over to you.
Thanks, Luke. I can't see the chat, so hopefully if there's any questions, can you please just interrupt me and ask?
I'll monitor it.
Thanks so much. My name's Simone Bennett. I'm a principal consultant at Brennan. They're an Aussie IT company. Maybe you've heard of them. And I am from, I'm from sunny Brisbane. Well, at the moment it's like hail and storms and fires Brisbane, but I'm from sunny Brizzy. And I really like insecure, unreliable and inefficient modes of transport, which is ironic when you think about the topic of this talk. And I've been working in tech since Windows NT. So I guess if you know what that is, you would know how old I am and maybe can commiserate with me about how things have changed. So normally I would do a quick roll call to see where you're from and what your skills are and if there's anything specific you wanted to get out of the chat. But I'm not sure if I can do that in this instance. But if you have any information like that, where you are, things that you came here to specifically learn, please pop them in the chat and I'll get Luke to shout out. So that way I can tailor the session to your requirements. I've got about an hour's worth of content, so I normally skip over the stuff that isn't relevant to the group. Cool. So when we talk about well-architected and I talk with customers about it, normally they're struggling with things like scalability. So they're having difficulty adjusting their resources to meet demand, or they have security vulnerabilities. We've seen a lot of really high-profile cases like that over the last few years. Maybe there's high operational costs. So companies are struggling to manage their expenses or their cloud resources usage, and they don't have great visibility over what is in there or how to optimize it. A lot of people come discussing reliability concerns. Maybe they're going live with they're a startup and they're going live for the first time, or they've just moved to the cloud and resiliency is done differently than it is on premises. And so they're concerned about how they're going to do disaster recovery and, protect against loss and downtime. We saw an outage last week with Azure Portal, and, there was a lot of commentary about how if that was architected properly or with a more considered way, I should say, then the outage wouldn't have impacted people. But there's a really good chance that nobody, who was architecting that solution maybe didn't realize they needed to consider certain things like front door or traffic manager. So it's not easy to stay across all of those things. Maybe you have monitoring gaps, so it's not uncommon for companies to not know that they have an outage or a slowness issue until users complain about it. And there's also performance shortfall. So maybe you're experiencing slow response times or just a poor user experience, and you don't really know what you've got wrong there. And when I think about it and I think about those problems, when I started in tech and we started doing virtualization, there was really clear guidelines. I remember deploying VMware for a company all around Australia, and there was very clear guidelines from VMware on what you need to do. It said like the RAM needs to go in these channels, you set the CPU to this, you set this in the BIOS, it needs to be this firmware. It was very easy to understand what your environment should look like and how you should optimize it for the best performance. But now a lot of the tech team and consulting, or if you're the senior tech architect in your company, you're left trying to balance cost, time, and scope. So maybe you've got the model with the sysadmin team or the cloud team where you're the bottleneck. So time is the thing that holds you back. Or maybe you have duplicated head count, so every team has infrastructure people, or maybe you're making so that increases cost. Maybe you're making your dev team manage the cost and the time and the architecture, so their scope is really big. But this consulting triangle fits perfectly in this scenario. None of those, you can't have one without the other. So if you want a shorter time, you have to have more cost. And if you want less cost, you might have less scope and time and things like that. And it's hard. It's a hard place to land. And a lot of the developers I speak to, or people who are working in full stack teams, just tell me they're burnt out. They understand there's no escaping learning some infrastructure, and you have to understand basic networking and basic databases, but they're struggling to learn that stuff when they're actually developers, or they want to maintain applications, and they're stuck learning all this stuff that doesn't get them to their end goal at the end of the day, writing code. And that lands us where we are. So if you're in that camp, that's what this talk is about today. So we're going to talk about the well-architected framework, Microsoft's well-architected framework. There is one for AWS, and it's decidedly similar. So if you work in both camps, it's still relevant. But if this isn't what you're expecting, please put it in the chat and let Luke know. But that's what we're talking about today, so hopefully you enjoy it. And before I get started, when I first started working at Microsoft years ago, there's the cloud adoption framework and there's a well-architected framework. And I was a little confused as to how they fit together because they seemed like almost the same thing. And so when I talk to customers about it, I like to explain that you have the cloud adoption framework. That's your entire journey to the cloud, your end-to-end. How are you going to have your migration happen? What's your company's strategy for the cloud? Are they cloud first? Are they multi-cloud? Are they using different vendors? How are you going to govern it and manage it? And what's the budgets? And how are you going to train your staff? That's cloud adoption. And it really is end-to-end for your whole company. And then we have well-architected framework, which we're going to speak about today, which is really about taking that one workload and optimizing it based on some predefined pillars. So if you think about cloud adoption framework is end-to-end cloud, and then well-architected is taking one stack in your cloud and making it better iteratively. Yeah, so these are the pillars for well-architected framework. There's reliability, security, operational excellence, cost optimization, performance efficiency, and there is a sustainability one. But I'll be speaking about these today. Security is a big one, and there's a lot of people doing really great talks on that. So I don't go into security in great depth because I think the content really does deserve its own subject, but I do cover off some things in there. But the other topics I'll be speaking about individually. And if you are interested in the well-architected framework, I can see Luke is posting a bunch of links. aka.ms/WAF is the starting point for everything well-architected. Okay, so when I talk to customers, they're like, great, there's a well-architected framework. I don't know what to do about this. And they usually have a problem. So the first thing I do is set a baseline. And a really easy way to do that with your team or your customers is to do a well-architected review, or maybe a go-live well-architected review. But if you go to the assessments page, there is well-architected reviews for almost every scenario. The AI one, for example, might be a great place to start if you're looking at AI workloads, but you're not sure how to cost optimize them and secure them and make sure they're, considered before you deploy them. So I would set a baseline with the well-architected review. It is not all just based on technology. So it goes through things about your team's processes and your budgets and your strategy, and it helps you figure that out. So it's not all just what's in the portal. It's parts of your business as well. And when I do it with customers, I usually suggest setting aside a couple of hours, getting in a room, bringing some snacks, and just really going through it in depth. But the problems I see with the well-architected review is oftentimes that it's done one time. So a customer comes and says, our costs are blown out, we're going to go broke, or we've had a security breach, or we need to pass an audit or something. And then they do the well-architected review, they get their results, they action them, and then it's done, instead of revisiting it or iterating on it. Or they get a lot of recommendations. So you do that review and you come back with 400 recommendations and the customer just doesn't know where to begin, and so they get paralysis from the too many decisions. And also it can be a point of friction between teams. I think we've all experienced doing a design for something, architecting it, doing a proof of concept, building it, getting it to work, deploying it, or going to deploy it, and then having security come back and say, hey, no, you can't use this thing that you decided on 2 months ago. Or a month after you deploy something, the finance manager coming down and saying, why is your cloud bill so high? And then you're back to the drawing board. And I think it's really important to consider these points as part of your processes every day, instead of doing a thing and then having to come back and fix it later, because it does cause friction and it creates rework. And a really good way to do that is with Azure Advisor. This is free. It's in the portal. It's available straight away. It's based on 30 days worth of data. And it's not as in-depth as those reviews I showed you in the assessments, but it's right there, available straight away. So I'm surprised a lot of people don't know about it, but it's a really good resource. It shows you high, medium, low. So that helps with the, just mountain of recommendations you might get. You can target them on the pillars you care most about and then the severity that they are. I also really like that it gives you a general score, because I think sometimes we're too busy fixing problems or focusing on new features, and it's hard to go back and do proactive work that works on technical debt. So when you have a score and you have the pillars, you can show a tangible benefit to the work you're doing. So if I go and fix some security vulnerabilities, my score would go up, and I can show the business that in my weekly reports or monthly reports. Instead of just saying, it's better, it's easier to manage, you have a tangible thing that you can show and justify the work that you're doing, which is really helpful. So I'm not sure if there's any questions that I should pause here, or should I just keep on rolling? Looks like keep rolling.
Keep on rolling.
Keep rolling? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
So this is how you can improve each pillar without having to go too deep. So we have reliability. That's where we're looking at availability, resilience, recovery, and how to design it for business requirements. And in my mind, it kind of overlaps with performance efficiency, where we're scaling horizontally and testing early and monitoring the health of the solution, so we know what's happening before our customers complain about things happening. They're not the same pillar, but in my mind, they kind of overlap a lot. And there's this joke, I don't know if you're chronically online like me, but last year everybody was asking their partners how often they think about the Roman Empire, and the answer was, every day or every week or something. And if I do this talk to an audience, I always get a lot of hands up saying people think about the Roman Empire once a week, which is crazy, because I never think about the Roman Empire. But do you know who I do think about all the time? Ticketek, because every time there's a concert, people can't buy tickets, and it's on the news, and people are having parties, and they've got 50 devices, and they're just desperately trying to get their Tay-Tay tickets. And I always just think, Ticketek knows that's going to be a popular concert. They know that they're going to get a really sudden burst of traffic. Why don't they, have scale sets, or why don't they pre-scale their environment before the tickets drop? They know when they're going to drop. It's not surprise traffic. And I was chatting to Ryan in my team, and he said, maybe it's perceived scarcity, where they love the free publicity, and it makes it feel like you have to rush to get the ticket. You don't dilly-dally about, do we really want to spend $500? You just, you all get it there and you just buy it and you don't think about it. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's fair. For Ticketek's case, that might be why they don't fix the problem, which is quite easy to fix. But for other companies, like Skims, for example, they just want to take your money every day as many times as they can. They don't want a barrier and they don't want perceived scarcity. And if you don't know who Skims is, sucks not having the audience because I like to ask everybody usually. But Skims is Kim Kardashian's company, and they make these cute pajamas that you can get and you can match with your doggo. And last year they had a huge big drop for Valentine's Day with these matching dog and owner pajamas. And they had all these celebrities like Adriana Grande and everybody else hyping it up on Instagram for weeks ahead. And then it dropped, and then their website instantly started crashing. And I was watching it unfold on social media, just cracking up laughing because, you know, they knew there would be traffic. They've been hyping it up incessantly for weeks and weeks and weeks. So why did they not have, you know, why were they not prepared for that? They don't want the experience Ticketek has. They want you to buy 500 pairs of matching dog pajamas. They want to, you know, fulfill as many orders as they can. There's no perceived scarcity in this. So I was watching them have their website go up and down for hours on end. And I was watching the comments just get more and more unhinged. And I really agree with Alyssa here. Like, you know, your website can't handle it. Kim Kardashian, you can't afford a few scale sets. She's a millionaire. Yeah, so I agree with Kylie. Like, buy some scale sets, Kim Kardashian. I really like Kendall being full Gen Z, unhinged, saying she'll jump off the roof if her page doesn't start to work. And then Michaela was the piece of resistance, saying she didn't get to match with her dog for Valentine's Day. She'd have a full-blown Menti bee. I think we've all been there. And it's a good point when you think about websites. Availability doesn't equal reliability, right? So even though the website is available, it might not be reliable. And that happened with this case as well. So after 12 hours or so, the website came back online. They posted on their socials, you know, we're all good. But then for the next few weeks, everybody was getting emails saying their order was cancelled. Or they were getting empty boxes in the mail, or they were getting other people's orders and not getting refunds and things like that. So that tells me that even though they got the front end part of that website scaled and working, the back end was definitely not equipped to scale and take the orders that were coming in now from the front end. And so there were still issues there. It was available 100%, but it was not reliable. And I stole this from another talk, this analogy, because I couldn't think of a better one of my own. But, you know, availability is you have a car and you have a spare tire. But does your team know how to change a tire? Do they know where the tire is? Do they know how to use the jack? Do they know that after a certain amount of time to get to the thing on time, they should just leave the car and take a taxi or an Uber or walk? Do they have a plan? And have they tested their plan? Does the tire in the boot actually have air in it? Examples like that. So just because something's available doesn't mean it's reliable. And understanding how to architect things to be reliable and highly available is, you know, it takes a lot of care and skill and architectural, you know, reading all the design patterns and things like that. Some things you can do to help your team, you know, test changing the tire is to build and test for large events. And there's some tools in Azure that will help you with that. Azure Chaos Studio and Azure Load Test will create synthetic errors or synthetic load. So you can not be in the skims position when you go live with your application. You can also have holistic observability using a product called Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts. This is free, and if you're not an expert in all 2,600 services in Azure, this is an excellent resource. So each product team gives the alerts that they think are important to that product. For example, the storage accounts alert you if someone deletes them or turns off immutability or deletes a backup. You don't have to go and configure every service and all the alerts and all the metrics for it. It will do it for you. So this is a great place to start. Even if you're an expert in some parts of infrastructure, I doubt anyone's a 2,600 services expert. So definitely take a look at this. It's easy to roll out, it's free, and it's updated regularly. I also really like the workbooks in Azure Advisor. I find it somewhat frustrating they're not built into the portal experience, but they go in depth. So they are free also. They're in there by default. And you can just see, like, this one is for the reliability pillar. So you can see in there, in this little mini recorded demo, the detail that it gives you. And then when you're talking about your application, so maybe your infrastructure is online. I think we could all agree that the SCIMS infrastructure was online, but the database or the application in the backend that's fulfilling those orders was not coping. And something like Open Telemetry gives you, immediate telemetry inside your applications. And it is cloud agnostic. So you could use this across whatever workloads you have. But I've noticed that the Azure services are starting to support Open Telemetry a little more, and I'm seeing it in the zeitgeist. So it's definitely worth having a look into if you want to know what's happening inside your apps before your customers start complaining about receiving empty boxes in the mail. I also really like Application Insights. This is built into the portal. It's not real time, but it's near real time. But it's still really good, especially if you're looking at historical or trying to predict the load you might need, or trying to troubleshoot issues and alert on failures. I probably wouldn't use it for something super mission critical as my only source of alerting, but it's definitely good enough for most applications that I've worked with. Oh yeah, there's some more things. Cool. So unless there's some things, no. Cool. So the next one is operational excellence, and that is where we're looking at holistic observability, like the Amber alerts there. And then also DevOps for reliable, predictable, automated deployments, and also paved paths and platform engineering. That's a real hot topic over the last 12 months. You hear it a lot bandied around. So let's dig into that. So I see two pillars when we're talking about that. There's that building the well-architected stack. So you want to start with, using the templates, using the design guidance, making everything best practices based on the doco. But the thing people miss is the keeping it well architected. So they do the well architected review, they use the stuff that's there, they build a really great environment, but they don't keep it well architected moving forward. And then tech debt starts to creep in, and people have really high cognitive load where they're trying to figure out how to, add stuff to it, or how to keep it online, or make sure it's not, hasn't got a bunch of security flaws and all those kind of things. And I really like this talk from Kelly Shawbridge. It's a great article, but this quote is great because it backs up the narrative of my talk. And that is that our common enemy is unintended behavior. So we want to build standardized patterns, and we want to build standards or solutions for cross-cutting concerns that apply to all services and software. So we want paved roads or patterns that we can use, and we don't have that cognitive load every single time we go to deploy something. So how can you build these paved paths or consistent, repeatable infrastructure deployments? I am Team Terraform. I think Leek's Team Terraform as well. But there's things like Pulumi, there's OpenTofu now, and then there's also ARM and Bicep, which is the Azure native version. I don't really care what language you choose. Obviously, if you ask me, I'll tell you to choose Terraform. But so long as you have infrastructure as code, I think you're a really long way to having a really good repeatable, consistent infrastructure deployment. And then if you don't know where to start with that, there's some options to help you get going. So when we talk about those patterns and those paved paths, the things I'm thinking of are Azure verified modules, Azure development environments, and the developer CLI templates. Again, I would always lean towards Azure verified modules because they belong in pipelines, and you can have change control, you have deployment gates, you have, a history of what's happened. Whereas the Azure development environments and developer CLI templates, they deploy from your local machine. They're probably good for dev tests, they're good for proof of concepts, but I wouldn't use them in production because no one else in your team can know what's happened. It's the same as running Terraform deployments from your local machine. There's no history of what's happened. Nobody's checking your work. Nobody else in the team can see what's changed. I just don't think that's a good way to work in a production environment. But for the, just getting something spun up to see how it works, then the other tools are great for that. This is Azure Verified Modules. So you can see on their website, they have a bunch of patterns, and they have different languages that you can use and different templates. So for example, if you want a Cosmos DB, it's there for you. And you can choose the Terraform or Bicep. This is the developer environments. I skipped ahead. my bad. This is the verified modules. And you can see they have the Bicep and Terraform available. And then you can see I use the Azure Landing Zones one, for example, all the time, which is predefined modules for all the different parts of the Azure Landing Zone. I don't have to think about every single resource in there. There's some sensible defaults built in for me, which I can just consume, which is awesome. Then the Azure developer environments. But if you don't have infrastructure as code and your environment's been sort of like, welcome to ClickClaps, baby, then that's okay. All is not lost. You can convert your brownfield environments to code. It's not easy, and I've had to do that by hand in the past, so I wouldn't have recommended that. But now there's some tools that make it a lot easier. There's AZTF export and AZ ops. In the early days, AZTF export used to be called Azure Terrify, so it made for a good joke. But now it's been built into the portal. So it is very, very handy. You can just create something. So for example, somebody's clicked in this storage account, and when I run my pipeline, I can see that it's going to delete it. But that's okay. I don't have to hand write it. I can just click export template, and then I can choose Terraform. I would choose AZ API nowadays because that's probably the most modern, or where it's going to end up eventually. And then you can just copy and paste, and it actually writes good code. It does sometimes miss bits and pieces, but it will get you, 80, 85% of the way there in my experience. It's also very handy if you're building something for the first time and the Docker is a bit light. I like to do this, build it in the portal in my dev environment, do this and see what parameters it's trying to pass. It's very handy for that. So you can just paste it into your editor of choice, and there you go. You've got, 80% of the way there. You can tweak it, you can run a plan, and it's much faster to get your environment back into code and keep going from there. Cool. So when we're talking about DevOps for reliable, predictable, automated deployments, we're talking about things like deployment gates. So someone has to stop and approve it, or you need to have, somebody check over it, or whatever deployment gates you want to have in place. It's not just, cowboy town. You have change control because there's a clear history of what's happened. And if need be, you can roll back to an earlier run of that code. And everybody can contribute. So I've had a good example where I do policy as code, and the dev team was getting super annoyed by things being blocked, but I wasn't the bottleneck. They could go to my code, they could see the policy I was deploying, and they created a pull request asking for a change. All I have to do is approve that pull request, and they're on their way. So we want to build a well-architected stack, and then we want to keep it well-architected, and we want to have automated guardrails in place to give teams immediate feedback so that the cognitive load is reduced and there's less tech debt and less rework later, months after you've architected it. I really like this example from Stripe. They make the little square tappy things that you pay for things at the market. And they had an outage. In 2022, they processed $817 billion worth of payments, which is no tiny amount. And I can only imagine what it is now. There's a really great series on Pragmatic Engineer going into how they architect their solution with no downtime. But if you cast your mind back to 2009, where they lost a massive number of customers and never returned, they had a huge outage, 2019, sorry. And they lost hundreds and thousands of customers because for hours they couldn't take money. So if you're at the market or you own a coffee shop, not being able to have people pay for a while is really impactful to your business. And so based on that, those customers that left and would never come back for obvious reasons, the Stripe team decided that operational excellence was going to be their number one goal. They were going to build systems where the easiest path was the safest and most reliable one. They wanted to make it really hard to do things that weren't well architected. And now, as a base of that focus, their API's reliability is now consistently in excess of 99.999%, right? So they, even under peak load, they have that reliability. They've really dedicated themselves to having operational excellence. They've made it very easy to do the right thing and very difficult to go outside of those boundaries. And that's really paying off. So people like Ticketek or Skims could take a leaf out of their book. Digital twins. I feel like that's in the IoT world, but maybe we can get Luke to jump on at the end and chat about that, Edmund. Thank you for the question. Cool. So if you want to build guardrails for your platform, I do that using enterprise policy as code. So for me, in my code base, I have all the policy there, I have all the assignments, and I have all the definitions. And if, as I said before, if the dev team would like the policy to change, they can see what's there, they know what's applied. It's a really big point of contention sometimes, policy slowing people down. They can see what's there, and they can create a pull request to change it. So I've got the one in there to say tags must be applied. If they didn't like that, they could raise a pull request, but my code deploys it just into the portal like you would if you clicked it in. So you can see it there, mandatory tags must be applied. Yeah, cool. So I'm not sure how I'm going for time, but I'll quickly talk to you. When I talk about policy, it's pretty hard to do that without talking about landing zones. Yeah, enterprise policy as code. That's the one. Yeah, so I use GitHub, but you can use whatever orchestration engine you like to use. And then at the root there, we have our Azure tenant, and we have our organizational resources there. So we have management groups. This is how I like to design them, but there is the Cloud Adoption Framework pattern, which pretty much looks like this. We have a layer of governance that sits over the top of that. So you've got, policy in the enterprise policy as code. We've got advisor alerts and monitoring and service health alerts from the Azure Monitor Baseline alerts, app insights, security, tagging from the policy, and cost management. Budgets can come from policy also. We have our platform landing zones. This has changed recently. So you have connectivity, identity management, and an optional security one. I have a DevOps one in my pattern for self-hosted runners, but that's not mandatory. And then we have your workload subscriptions. So this is where each team has a boundary around what they do, and they have their workload inside a subscription, and then you can apply policy and tagging and all sorts of stuff to that subscription. So this is an opinionated, future-proof base for your workloads, so you don't have to go back and retrofit it later. And then, of course, don't forget your dev test subscriptions in the sandbox. So they're cheaper, they have lower SLAs, they're good for sandbox environments specifically. So this is where I add my tagging policy, for example. So everything there inherits a tag from the subscription. I don't enforce tags on resources because it's annoying with some of the services like container apps that deploy the resource, or AVD does it as well. But if you enforce that they have to inherit tags from the subscription, at least you end up with everything with a tag on it. Yeah. And then that's the policy it applies. So if you look in AZ Policy Advertiser, you can see the policy there. You can see the settings you need for your code. And it usually has a link to the Enterprise Policy as Code repo as well. So you can go and take a copy of it or deploy it. So you can see in there that I've got, this is for my budgets. So you can see that I've got them configured, and they're the variables you can choose. So I add budget policy at the app workload management group because different workload teams would have different budgets. And also don't neglect to add a budget to your sandboxes because you do want to know if somebody's hacked them or spun up a bunch of cryptoware or something like that. Yeah, so everything with policy gets a budget automatically, which is awesome. And then we use subscription vending to pump out those subscriptions with everything pre-configured that we require. We have the monitor baseline alerts applying monitoring and alerting. We have budgets applied. We have tags applied. All that kind of stuff is governance and guardrails. So it's really hard for the teams to ignore the sensible defaults. Do I need to?
One thing worth mentioning as well, you had security baseline there. So you, based on the well-architected pillars, the little shield down the bottom, but based on the architected pillars, you've already got essentially the baseline of what operational excellence tools that you need, and then Defender for Cloud capability within Defender as well. So you bake that into your subscription vending capability. So it all adds up, right? It's about what you said, reducing the cognitive load by creating these baselines based on the best practice and the organization frameworks, and then baking it in so you don't have to think about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I like, to just have sensible defaults, right? So you don't have to think about it every time. It just sort of happens for you. And this is Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts that I was talking about. So I think I spoke about that earlier. I'm not sure why I've added it a second time. My apologies. But this is how your landing zone looks in the end. So you have subscriptions with a boundary of control for each team. You have robust monitoring and security and benchmarks and the governance all in that overarching layer that usually sits in the management subscription if it's not a global resource. We have auto remediation set on our production environment and our application environment, and then we might have just auditing enabled on the sandbox environment, but we still want to have guardrails there. We have groups created automatically in code. We have alerting and budgets created automatically for our subscription owners. So they just happen and they get the alerts so they know what the cost is of their workload, not somebody who comes in and talks to them 2 months later. And we have less restrictive policy in Sandbox. And I usually employ Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts up at the root there, but that's up to you depending on your structure. And you have obviously permissions set at the tenant. And everything is version controlled and infrastructure and policy is code, which I love. Everything is code. We do logging for the platform in the Log Analytics workspace in the platform subscription. And then you could also have logging for each application if the teams need to be accessing it all the time inside the application subscriptions. So Luke, how much time do I have left?
It's up to you. One of the things that I just want to pause based on, like, we could probably go for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
But just around the, like, if someone wants to know more about this, the well-architected framework, the cloud adoption framework, Amber, like, there's a whole bunch of capabilities there, but you've done a really good job of just being practical about it as well. So no, it's all good. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll pop back on the screen when it's time.
Okay, I'll whiz through some of them so that we don't go over time. But yeah, so in summary, we want to have guardrails for your infrastructure, but it's also really good to have guardrails for your pipelines, right? That's where everything happens. That's where the magic happens. And again, we want to make it hard to override those sensible defaults. When I'm putting guardrails in my pipeline, I like to use things like Terraform Validate and Terraform Format just for basic hygiene. But then also TF-Lint is excellent. And if you look in the TF-Lint, you can see all the rules that it can apply for you. You can have them enforced or in auditing, but they are a great place to start to make sure you don't even push code in that's bad. I also really like PS Rule. If you use Bicep, you can build that in. It's written by Bernie in Brisbane. He's amazing. It's an amazing tool. It's like every part of the well-architected framework as code, and you can build it into your pipelines. You can also use it, once your stuff's deployed. It doesn't have to be built into your pipelines. I was looking at the question and I missed this, but if you look in the Azure verified modules, the team has a big list of what they're using in their pipelines for guardrails. So my suggestion would be to go and look at the Azure verified modules, see what they're going to check if you try to make a change in their environment in the TF mod scaffold, and steal the things that look good to you. It's open source. You can totally look at it, but they have TF-Lint and a bunch of stuff in there. You can see how they've configured it and what parameters they've given it, and it's a really good place to start. Terraform test is a new-ish feature. It's kind of more for validating code, but I really like this quote where some things aren't tests, some things are policy. So you might want to test on how something is configured. Like, I want this storage to have the correct name. But if you want to say, I want storage to be immutable, that's policy. So I guess Terraform test doesn't remove the need for policy, but there's a really good talk about Terraform test and policy in the link in the chat, in the slide. Okay, I'm going to skip through security as fast as I can because we have 10 minutes and there's so many talks about it. But there's like a whole called DevSecOps, and that's because security is super important to build into your pipelines, and none of us want to be on the news. That's my only goal in life, don't be on the news. And there's some interesting stats about how the pressure of the business pushes people to push code or make changes in the portal that aren't entirely secure. So I think it's good to recognize that and have things in place that make it hard to push that stuff out. These are the tools that you could use. I'll skip through. You can grab them. This resource is amazing. It is from the government. It's called cyber.gov.au. It has all the different types of environments. For example, AVD. The other day, I was helping review an AVD design. I went here. I had a look at their recommendations for securing AVD. And I just went through the checklist and made sure we had addressed those to make sure it was most up to date with the latest vulnerabilities and things like that. Is it automated? Absolutely not. Is it still a really good resource for well architecting your environments? Yes, very much, especially if you have secure environments or government or anything like that. I also really like the security tools in GitHub. So if you use GitHub, Dependabot is great. I don't need to stay on top of every single repo I have and what the latest vulnerabilities are. It will go ahead and look at those for me and create a pull request, and I just need to approve the pull request and then it fixes it. So with the Log4j a few years ago, this would have gone through and just quickly patched everything for me. I wouldn't have had to go looking for it to fix it up. So it's a really good tool. Cool. So the last thing that I talk about is value for money, and that is the cost optimization pillar, and it goes across every single thing. I'll go as fast as I can, but there's a really good talk about Duolingo, and they have their engineering blog. It's great, but they talked about how they wanted to reduce costs, and they needed to see where everything was sneaking off to. So they did some studies, and tagging. We'll skip past that one. I've just messed up my slide order. My apologies. So cost management, budget alerts. These come automatically in policy. As you can see, I showed you earlier, you apply policy as code, create budgets per subscription. And I will reiterate, there's no point sending budget alerts to somebody who doesn't own the workloads. I want to know as a person who's building things that is costing too much money. And I want to be able to go and re-architect that before the bill comes in at the end of the month. So send alerts to the people who own the workload. The people who are the owners of the subscription, the people who are building the app should get the alerts for the budgets. There's a great talk by Sahil Patel. I absolutely love every talk he gives, but he talks about how we often cost optimize the infrastructure around our apps, but we don't have a ton of regard for the performance per unit of compute that we're buying. So we often don't take full advantage of a hardware that's available inside of our VMs or our container instances. And so at Monzo Bank, they saved a ton of money by optimizing the applications inside to better use the software. I think he changed the SKU of the CPU and got like a much higher performance. Oh, that was Honeycomb IO, sorry. They got a 30% increase in price performance by switching to the newest CPU. Like, there's such a small change for such a huge cost saving. This is the Duolingo one that I was referring to earlier. They did some telemetry, probably using something like OpenTelemetry, and they found out that, I'm going as fast as I can. They found out they had 1.2 billion unnecessary calls per day, and every call costs money, right? So they changed their time to live down from 1 minute to an hour, and they reduced their traffic by more than 60%. And you can see the huge drop there in the graph. That's not something around the VM or reserved instances. That's around architecting your app. And I really, really like this emerging trend. I won't talk on it too much since we're short on time, but energy and CPU efficient computing is a real trend that I'm seeing pop up in a lot of the, ThoughtWorks and Gartner and all that kind of stuff. There's a great talk here in the link. I love this tool, InfraCost. I don't think many people haven't heard of this now, but it shows you the cost of your stuff in VS Code. You can run it in your pipeline also. So this is my pipeline for our landing zone. You can see I turned on everything. So my cost in my pull request said it's going to be $800 more, and I can go, oh, whoops. I accidentally on purpose turned on the Bastion and a firewall and everything else and the container registry, and it shows me what it's going to cost. So before I even push my code, I can have a visibility of the cost of what I'm going to deploy. So I just can't reiterate enough that not having people do rework later to change costs is going to be much more efficient for your team. Cost and security should be right at the forefront of what they're doing, and you should be able to correct what you're doing before you even push it into prod. This is in VS Code. You can see the total monthly cost there in the little plugin. And there's also the Azure cost estimator if you use ARM and Bicep, which I don't, but you can. Reserved instances, I'll skip through them. And cost-saving opportunities. We're nearly at the end, Luke. I'm going as fast as I can. These are the pillars. I love this website because it does recognize that there's trade-offs. You can't have a highly secure and reliable environment that's also super cheap. And you can't have a super cheap environment that's really operationally, performant, efficient, things like that. You need to consider the trade-offs. So this page helps you understand your business needs and choose which pillars you should prioritize and how you can talk to the business about the trade-offs. Okay, so we set a baseline. We want to use things like Azure Advisor, workbooks that are built in there, the budgets, and we want to use tools like Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts to see our environment with minimal setup and without having to be in-depth experts about all the different things. They're pre-canned, they're available, they're free. You could just use them right now. Then we want to look at guardrails. We want to look at policy as code. We want to enforce best practices and make it hard to vary from the sensible defaults. We want to try and have infrastructure as code, and we want to use things like Azure Verified modules. And then when we're in expert mode, we want to create paved paths, repeatable infrastructure. We want to set up automated testing and linting, and we want to have scalable infrastructure that, works well and is repeatable and consistent every time. This is me. You can catch me on Blue Sky, aka new Twitter. This is my LinkedIn, and I did a health check on Michaela. She seemed really happy in her matching outfit with her doggo. Thank you for having me, Luke and team.
I will always remember that. I'd never heard of the company before, and now I have. So, yeah, when you wake up of a morning, you don't realize what you're going to learn in the day.
Yeah, well, next Valentine's you can get in early, but I'd have a backup plan. You can get an empty box again. Yeah.
So we did have a couple of questions in chat. One I'll just cover off right now. This is not a talk on digital twins. However, it's an interesting one to look at, and I'll see if I can get someone to speak about digital twins in another session. So thank you for revealing the need for that. The other thing, and I think it flowed really well on actually your last couple of slides in terms of expert versus advanced versus beginner. So the question was labs, like where do you start from a step-by-step learning in a practical approach? And I think one of the things that I liked, Simone, about your talk is that like a lot of these tools and functionalities, they're tools to use in production or tools to help guide production use. Like all of these, I don't see not fitting anywhere within like a production environment. The thought processes, the tools like Effortless for cost analysis, Amber, like these are things that as, consultants, what we advise to deliver, because why reinvent the wheel, right, within customers' environments? And so I like this intermediate level, like for someone getting started and looking maybe at a practical approach for getting started, what would you recommend here?
To get started with well architected?
Yeah, well architected, and let's just say like Azure landing zones to begin with, like because that would cover a lot of the base thought processes that you need. So would you go, like my view is if you want to get started and you've never touched Azure before, jump in the portal. Go and create a workload in Azure within the portal, have a look at it, take a look at even like what you did and go into the export ISE, like Bicep and Terraform, because it tells you exactly how that resource and the parameters are laid out. Take a look at that. Even Azure landing zones use the portal interface, although you actually that without cost analysis tools like Effortless to warn you that you're about to deploy DNS protection, cost can get really really out of control. But like, just get started with well architected.
I would start with I think it's unlikely someone's never touched Azure, but if you haven't, you're not looking at well architected, you're just looking at learning how to build anything. The Azure Architecture Center is an okay start. It's got some patterns. If you're going to click things in and sort of see how they look and see diagrams. The documentation, most of the documentation, like I was looking at App Gateway the other day, and it has a well-architected page, and it has like a full checklist of everything you need to know for Application Gateway. Like make sure it has this, make sure it has that, it should be this, and blah, blah, blah. So you don't need to know Application Gateway off by heart. You can go look at the well-architected page of the resource documentation and just follow the checklist. I would also suggest if you are a business, it's more likely you have some resources in Azure and you just don't know how to make them in a, well architected, or even see what's there or what could be improved. And that's where the architected review is good if you've got an immediate problem that you really want to deep dive into, like cost or security or reliability. But otherwise, I would look at Azure Advisor. It's very actionable. It's free. It's already there. It's very easy to navigate. And you can set up alerts and stuff from it as well.
That's a good one. I'm still surprised at how many people don't know about Advisor, but it's there. And I think it's something that you just need to favorite because it's so useful and it does get updated as well with new resource capabilities and recommendations.
So I just set up alerts for the subscription owners. So if I deploy a subscription for you, Luke, in my organization to build your application in, I set up budget and Azure Advisor alerts to go to you as the owner of that app. So you can see like there's a vulnerability or it's not reliable or something's not backed up or someone's deleted your storage. You get those alerts, not some central team that isn't invested in the health of your app. So I think it's really important for that stuff to be visible to the person who's building it.
Yeah, which doesn't underestimate the cloud adoption framework as well in those, and to work out actually who's responsible and accountable. I'll just make up words in the space as well. It's one of those days, so forgive me.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
But yeah, so cloud adoption framework there for business readiness, and then well architected for. Thank you very much for coming and presenting to us today.
Thanks.
Definitely connect with Simone and on Blue Sky or LinkedIn. Wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much for coming and presenting and dedicating your time and knowledge to us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the questions as well. I can't see anybody, so I'm glad that that's something that's good to know.
Cool. I'll stop the stream. Thank you all for attending, and hopefully you've learned something and had fun along the way and a few laughs like I have.